Hi, I'm Tommy Moore from the Bartitzer Lab, and in this video we're going to be looking at street jabbing. How to use, deploy, optimize and alter the use of the jab for self-protection and self-defense. Now when people look at arts like boxing and they look at things they might take from boxing and put into self-defense, self-protection, combatives, whatever lipstick you want to put on that particular pig, one of the first things that goes out the door for many people, one of the first things that people easily and flippantly disregard is the use of the jab, because in a boxing format, not always but most often, the jab is used as a play over time. It's to test a range, it's to keep a range, it's to probe, it's to find gaps in offense, it's to build, it's the entree to something which closes the deal, or indeed it helps you go into survival mode. But there are a number of situations where the use of a jab can actually be really, really beneficial for people that are looking for unarmed self-protection. And if you watch videos online, if you watch conflicts online and you see how people that have some degree of boxing training perform, you'll note that people still very often, very rapidly and very successfully deploy the jab as much as any hook or any cross or any uppercut. People in earnest that use the jab tend to do quite well. So we're going to break down, what does a street jab look like, what does it feel like, how could we optimize, how could we amend things that you might want to build into your training. Again, obviously I don't have all the answers, but it's just something to think about. Have I overlooked the jab for self-protection in lieu of other things, and how could I bring it back into the fold? Because we know empirically that using the jab is very successful when we are fighting and when we are sparring. So what can we take from that? What can we learn from it? How can we best utilize it? Why might I use a jab? Well, a couple of reasons why I might use a jab in a self-protection context. One of the first ones is it allows me to make some space to get my shit together. If the first I know of a conflict, if I've not been paying attention, is me being swatted by something, me being hit by something, something hitting me in the eyes, whatever, if I can land, if I can jab effectively, if I can take a shot, I can be hit, shoved, pushed, grabbed, if I can just, if I can hit and move either in or out or laterally, I lash out with something that's fast, that can cause pain and damage, but doesn't enforce me to overcommit. If I don't hugely know where the pain stimuli is from, you can lash out, give yourself a bit of time, a bit of space to make a concerted decision as to whether, shit, there's a lot of them, I'm going to fuck off. Shit, he's got a knife, I'm going to grab this chair. Or shit, actually it's just the one of them, I can make another decision. But firing out those jabs, blah, blah, allows you to put something nasty out there in the periphery of that person and buy yourself a bit of time and space with which to consider, am I going to go for palm strikes? Am I going to continue boxing? Am I going to grapple? Am I going to run away? Am I going to move to an exit? What am I going to do? Jabs are really good at being instinctive shots to buy yourself some time and get your shit together, tool up if you need to, situational weapons, or fuck off. They're also really great at creating space if you're up close too. Many people think of the jab as just a long-range probing weapon, but there are many ways in which you can use a jab close up. So we're going to look at some of those too. But before we go into that, we're just going to make a point on knuckle alignment for using boxing without the gloves. Now, people that bare knuckle box, historically, not the modern iteration of bare knuckle boxing, but people that did it as a solid, nearly lifelong profession. People that bare knuckle box for many, many rounds over a long career. Pretty much unanimously, ubiquitously, universally hit with a vertical fist. And there are a number of reasons for that. But for hundreds of years, pretty much all bare knuckle boxing was done with a vertical fist. And those people, it's not like there's health insurance. It's not that there's anyone that's going to look after you if you break your hands. If your hands are your living, you smash up your hands, you're not going to have a great time as an 18th century, 19th century bare knuckle boxer. So those people making considered choices which really affect their income, their lifestyles, their lives itself, It's important to listen to why they might do something. Whilst you see modern BKB fighters use any type of normal boxing punch, they are wrapped up, and many of the things that traditional bare knuckle boxers did have just fallen out of awareness and consciousness for people that train in boxing. But there's lots of things you can learn about bare knuckle boxing, but an important one, if you take a flattish object, such as this fantastic book by a certain author, you take a relatively flat object and you hit it at face height, which, let's be honest, is where you're going to be hitting in most self-protection scenarios. And you do it with a normal horizontal fist, and you break that down into super slow. You'll notice that your shit knuckles will hit before your good knuckles. These shitty foreknuckles will hit before your good knuckles. You see, unless you unnaturally kink your wrist, which is going to cause you a lot of damage, if you go with a straight, locked in, standard shot, if you really break down the timings, these little crappy knuckles will hit first because the fist is slanted. So, a lot of people end up over-rotating their wrist, which is going to cause massive damage to your own wrist. Or they end up just making contact with knuckles that aren't going to do the job. They're not going to do the job. This is because most people's fists, they slide away diagonally. So good knuckles, diagonal slant, shit knuckles, which means those shit knuckles will always be the brunt of the shot coming in. When you do this test yourself, make sure you're hitting it head height. If you hit to the body, it's slightly different. You can rotate it down and you can hit with these big knuckles. But for things that come to the maxillofacial region, if you want to hit with a big knuckle, you'd be much better advised to go with a horizontal fist. Anything that comes up towards face height, either directly or comes up from down low, will hit with a decent knuckle first, because, as I mentioned, these shit knuckles slide away. So in a vertical context, your good knuckles are going to land on target. So it's a much safer, much better way to be striking bare knuckle. You don't have to do it that way, and you can be very successful only ever boxing in a normal orthodox fashion with horizontal fists. But if this is something you're looking to experiment with and test, strike harder, tougher object surfaces, do some bare knuckle sparring, feel the difference between a vertical and a horizontal. History tells us this was the safer, more preferred method, and I myself, when I spar, when I train, I much prefer this with a lighter glove or no glove than this. In either instance, something to think about with your street jab. So that's your knuckle alignment, things to think about. Other things that you'll want to think about is that you don't want to be just flicking a jab if you're looking for a self-protection, self-defense scenario. You're going to want a bit more sting on it. You don't want to lose the speed. You don't want to lose the ability to hit and move, hit and run. But by the same token, we cannot afford transactional flick jabs. They do have to have a bit of pain, a bit of womp on them. So things that you might want to consider. Easy things to consider would be moving in a drop step format. So stepping forward just before your foot hits the ground, the fist makes contact. Nice and simple. There are lots and lots of drop step drills out there that can talk you through that process. But in essence, it's being able to hit as you move, and the maximum mass transfer. So I'm just going to use my open hand instead of a fist, just so it's easy for you to see. The maximum weight transfer onto Bob is just before my lead foot hits the ground. Yeah, because all of my weight is traveling this direction. So if I want to put maximum mass at speed is force, so if I want to put maximum force into this guy, instead of being maybe just a transactional jab, you may wish to drop step jab. Bang! Drop step jab. Bang! It doesn't matter if the foot hits the ground and then the fist hits, but it will not be as powerful and it will not carry as much mass as if you get it to land just before your foot. So being able to drop step is important. Other things you may wish to consider is what's known as passive defense. Passive defense will be something like this. I throw a normal typical jab, pap, 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 yeah. If I want to throw a jab that keeps the side of my jaw and the side of my neck safe, I may wish to raise the shoulder higher than would be typical. So normal, there's a little gap. Higher. So then if there is a stick, if there is a blade, if there is a fist, if there is a grab towards that throat, chin, neck area, which is a very dangerous area to be attacked in any way, that raise is very important. So again, something to think about, raising that shoulder higher than normal, so that if the opponent has a simultaneous reflex, if they go for something at the same time, it's landing pretty harmlessly on the meat of your arm and not into your neck or into your jaw. So you've got knuckle alignment, trying to use a vertical fist. You've got drop steps, putting more mass into the shot if you can. If you can't do that, what you can do is get quite a lot more mass and quite a lot of passive protection by using an extended shoulder, exaggerating the raise of that shoulder to keep your jaw and your neck safe. Other things you want to think about when you're jabbing for self-protection, self-defense is a lot of things will come at different clock face angles. It's unlikely to be face to face. So you need to be able to get used to going from, let's say, you're at the bar, you're at the pub, you're at the cash machine, negative stimuli here. You need to be able to move in or move out from the side. So you need to change your jab to come from slightly less orthodox angles. So from the side, from slightly behind. You need to be able to get used to getting it out there from positions which are less than normal. Predominantly from the side, from slightly behind. So again, get used to normal life, and then get that shot in there. Whether you want to crash in, bang, or whether you want to fade out. You might practice fading out, going from an instinctive launch jab to grabbing a chair. Whatever you want to do. But it's a good way to experiment with how can I go from an oh shit stimuli, whether I've been struck, pushed, hit, bottle thrown at your head, or you clock the threat coming. How do you get in or get out as per what you want to do? So get used to a jab to come in and a jab to fuck off. Both are important to drill and to play with. Very, very important indeed. So omnidirectional jabbing is also a really good thing to think about. If I'm facing 12, can I do it at 12? Yeah, of course I fucking can. Of course I can. Can I do it to 1? Can I do it to 2? Can I do it to 3? Yep. Another thing you need to get used to is the notion that the jab might be predicated by where your feet are, not necessarily which is your strongest or weakest hand. So you understand that most of the time when you're being a normal human being and you're walking and you're buying stuff and you're on your phone, your feet could be parallel, left forward or right forward. And an attack could come at any time, at any juncture, whatever leg is forward. So you need to be able to get used to being able to have any hand as the jabbing tool, because the jab would be dictated by which leg is foremost, even if it's just slightly, or which arm is foremost just slightly. So you need to be able to get used to, if I'm here, the jab could be my right hand or my left hand. From here, my jab will naturally be my left hand. If I'm here, my jab will naturally be my right hand. Things to think about. Another aspect is to think about the targeting. How do we change our jab now to be more aligned to things like the throat? How do we change our jab that if we're just off center, we can get just behind the ear? How can we get it into places that it wouldn't typically go? So another way to level up the jab is if you think you might go eye, throat. You might put it into places where with a boxing glove, it's not going to cause major damage, but fist, bam, right into that eye socket and then bam, right into that throat. That could be another level of force, context depending, that you may wish to deploy. You can get knuckles into better places. Also, body shots are more telling without the glove, naturally. You've got these knuckles, they're really good at finding their way into the gaps between the ribs. They're really good getting bone on bone into things like solar plexus. You can really dig them into the liver, the spleen, the groin. You can get quite a lot more source and a lot more effect from your body shots. Not that I'd recommend that as your go-to, but obviously it does help. But even in the maxillofacial region, face, neck area, getting into the throat, getting behind the ear, getting to those places is much easier. So thinking about your targeting, where am I putting the jab? Another thing to think about, or another important principle, is being able to double tap it, double it up or triple it. Because if you're facing an unknown stimuli, let's say a bottle's just been flung at my head and I go, shit, or I've been pushed or shoved and I've gone, shit, my targeting is going to be less than ideal. And odds are it won't be perfect first time. So if I just rely on the one shot, I might fuck it up. Whereas if I can get used to instinctive negative stimuli, if I can get used to popping a good number of jabs out, get used to potentially hitting, micro-adjusting hitting. These are all things that you can get used to. So you might go, oh, first shot might be a bag of shit, you might just hit him on the cheek. Fuck. But if you're firing multiples of that, you might go, fuck, decent, into the throat. You've got those options to play with. Why just fire it once? Why not fire it 3 times? If I'm moving backwards, that, boom, 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 might allow me just enough time to get my shit together to fire something bigger, to fire a bigger piece of artillery at him. So doubling it up is important. If you think about it, when people are looking to shoot and kill someone, they don't rely on bullet 1, bang. They're relying at least 2, bang, bang. Because you never know if the first one's going to be shit, or you might need multiple shots on target. So being able to A, fire at multiple jabs, that's important, and B, being able to micro adjust where those jabs might go. That's a really important skill set to have. And you can also think about proxemics of the jab, in that you might use the jab to open up more space for a bigger piece of artillery. So if we're up close here, you might jab in a very close range to buy yourself the room to fire something else. So you might go up close and the jab may launch you back or may launch them back. But either way, I've taken a small space where the fight might just get too mauly, too nasty, too gougy, too bitey for anyone's particular taste. You might go from here, you fired that jab, made a good runway for yourself, following which you could move into palm strikes, slaps, yoke hand blows into the throat, shots to the groin, whatever the fuck you're going to do. But that jab might be the range tool you need to get this off. And if you think shoulder high, you actually you open up your chest. Think here, if I stay front on, I don't have much space. Soon, if I jab and raise that shoulder, I've got a bit more of a runway here now. Bang, bang, bang. Whatever the fuck you're going to do, you've got a bit more space. Space equals time, time equals choice. You can choose what the best tool for the situation is. And then obviously you can use that to flow into other combatives. As I mentioned, super close range jab gives you the space I need to fire that palm heel in there. It could be that my instinctive flash jab moving back buys me the space I need to kick him in the bollocks. It might be that that instinctive flash jab back might buy me the awareness to be able to fight. And indeed, when you're thinking about the jabs and you're deconstructing boxing for self-defense, let's take a ubiquitous combination like a 1-2. You might want to get used to, if there's more than one opponent, how could an instinctive jab to goon number 1 lead to a good cross on goon number 2, as opposed to a typical 1-2. How could we be moving in a space where we're going 1-2? We're moving through opponents at different areas of the clock face where they may be. So our instinctive jab here at 12 o'clock might allow me to cross at 10 o'clock. My instinctive jab here at 12 o'clock may allow me to cross at 2 o'clock. because again, there could be multiple people around you. So, to wrap it up, jabbing can be a useful tool, and there's a great degree of evidence out there to showcase how the jab can be very effective, making space, creating opportunities, helping you get your shit together. Things you might want to think about: is my knuckle alignment decent? Am I using knuckles in a smart and clever way? And that's something you have to experiment with yourself. Can I use extra tools to generate torque, power, mass? Have I used the drop step effectively? Do I know how to raise the shoulder to provide extra passive defense? Defense you don't even need to think about. Have I thought about jabs in different directions to standard? Have I thought about ones that move in at 10 o'clock, at 9 o'clock, at 8 o'clock? You know, can I bang, bang? Can I launch a jab out and then move into something else at an angle which is otherwise atypical? Have I thought about changing the targets up? You know, if I'm super close range, can I get that jab into the throat? Yeah, can I get that short, sharp dig into the groin? What's my jab like if I can just launch it right into the liver, spleen, solar plexus? Have I thought about different targets and how having no glove might change the efficacy of those targets? Have I thought about being able to double tap, triple tap? What are the benefits in being able to launch out 2, 3, 4 jabs, changing direction where those jabs are? Bam, bam! Then I've got my shit together. It's fast, whiplash fast. Have I thought about the multiple opponent scenario? Can I jab in one way and cross in another way? Can I break up the structure of what typical boxing looks like? And have I looked at how I could flow my jab at close range, at long range, into other areas of combatives, and how can I bring that together? So there's lots to be said for bringing the jab in as one of your tools for self-protection. But I would say you need to get used to it, you need to trust it, you need to enjoy it, you need to experiment with it yourself. I've boxed for a long time, so I love jamming, I love crossing. It's a big tool of mine. You will only be able to do what you do. So again, if you enjoy boxing, if you enjoy more combat sports orientated arts, you might think, if a jab's very intuitive, how do I micro-optimize my jab to be self-protection ready, as opposed to picking up and using a tool which I may be unfamiliar with or less confident with? Again, just food for thought. Many people prefer eye jabs, many people prefer palm heels. It's horses for courses. Me, I like closed fist striking. I find it very useful, but you need to apply the right considerations from how people strike without gloves to how people strike with gloves. That's why it's always worth a look into the past to see what you can bring into the future. But those are just a couple of my pointers on building a street effective jab. Hopefully something that you experiment with, give it a go, let me know how it goes. Enjoy!